I want to welcome everybody. And this is the Iowa Field of Dreams chapter of SABR for our Zoom meeting. We're hopefully going to be kind of up and going, a little bit more active here. Our guest speaker tonight, which you can see his name there, it's Rick Cerrone. He is the editor in chief of Baseball Digest, which has been around for 84 years and baseball's leading magazine. Oh, yep, there it is.
Wow, look at
Okay,
this.
John's showing it right now. Good.
Wow, this is
All right.
great.
Very good. It always helps to suck up to the speaker ahead of time. That's good. So anyway, hopefully all of you were able to read Rick's bio that I sent. But if not, let me just give you a quick recap of some of his highlights. He's been involved in various baseball capacities, connected with the game for what, about 50 years now, almost.
Yeah, this is year number 50.
Wow. Okay, that's incredible. So a couple of his highlights, if you didn't weren't able to read his bio, he founded Baseball Magazine in 1977 when he was just 23 years old. Amazing. He was on the PR staff of two baseball commissioners, Bowie Kuhn and Peter Uberoff. He pioneered a groundbreaking sports talk radio show that's been kind of a model for programs today. He was PR with the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1987 to 1993. And then he got his childhood dream job. And he did actually talk about this, I think, with your like high school guidance counselor, something
That's
like that.
correct. Yeah,
He told his high school guidance counselor he wanted to be PR director for the New York Yankees. And guess what? He was PR director for the New York Yankees for 11 years from what were they, 1996 to 2006. And of course, they won 4 world championships during that time period. So, anyway, that is just kind of a brief overview of Rick's bio. Hope you'll have some questions. I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute here, and he'll kind of make some opening remarks. And then what I'll try to watch, and we got Kevin over here as co-host as well. We'll watch for, I think a lot of you are familiar, you can raise your hand and we'll try to call on you and in the order that we see them. But if we miss you, I apologize. We'll try to keep tabs on as much as we can. So with that, we're very excited to have Rick join us today. And Rick, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Kevin. And I got to tell you, it's an honor for me to be with you. And I can't think of a better name for your chapter than Field of Dreams. I mean, come on, that's perfect. Um, Saber, really the backbone of the game. And I'm going to follow up on what John said, how my dream started. It really started when I learned from buying a Yankees yearbook on one of my one time a year visits to Yankee Stadium back in the late 60s. In the back of the book, they had something like the team behind the team, and there was a group photo of about 20, 30 people, front office people, the head of scouting, ticket sales, and there was a gentleman named Bob Fischel that I would come to know and be dear friends with, who was the director of public relations. And then when I'm listening to games on the radio or watching on TV, I would hear Phil Rizzuto say, "Oh, Bob Fischel just walked into the booth to tell us that that home run by Joe Pepitone puts him 11th on the all-time Yankee list." And I'm like, I knew I was never going to grow up to be Mickey Mantle, but I didn't see any reason I couldn't be Bob Fischel. So I went to a new high school when I was probably 13 years old because I was behind everybody, and I had a tough time adjusting to going from class because when I went to a parochial grade school and I never left my desk. When you change subjects, you just grab the right book under your desk and that was it. But this was like a free for all. You're going here, you're going here, you're protesting the war, you're working on the committee for the bonfire at homecoming. And I basically was good at everything except academics. And I actually had to take two classes over again in the summer just to become a sophomore. I like to tell people I enjoyed the classes so much I decided to take them again, but that really wasn't the case. So in that summer of 1968, um, we had a local paper in Yorktown Heights, New York called the Yorktowner. It was a weekly paper, and I would thumb through it. And here's an article that says Richard Swales named principal at Yorktown High School. And Richard Swales was my guidance counselor. Oh, I'm going to get a new guidance counselor. It really meant nothing to me at the time. I did not realize that that article I was reading would change my life because all of Richard Swales' students were given a new guidance counselor. And I don't know how they divvied them up, whether it was by the letter of your last name or I don't know, whether they had a draft. But I ended up with a man named Forrest Buddy Dowds, who I knew of because he was also the football coach. And Buddy Dowd's father was the first ever head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1933. So I remember this vividly. I'm sitting in Mr. Dowd's office. I can still picture the scene. I'm on the side of his desk. He's sitting there in his white shirt and his black tie. And he's looking at what I used to refer to as my rap sheet. It was my grade, my grades from freshman year. And he finally looks up at me, kind of exasperated. And he was the don't picture a football coach. Picture a minister talking to someone on death row. He would never be cast in a movie as a football coach. A minister, maybe. But he turned to me and he said in a soft voice, if you could do anything you want, what are you doing in, say, 10 years? Now, I know that whatever answer I give him, I want to get into construction. I want to be a firefighter like my father. I want to be an airline pilot. Whatever it was, he's going to say, well, that's great, but if you want to do that, you're probably going to need a high school diploma, and we're not off to a very good start. But I kind of floored him, and I talked to him about, I don't bring it up, but he brings it up every time I'm with him. And it was last Saturday when I had lunch with him in Boynton Beach, Florida. He's 93 years old, sharp as a tack, told the story again. He said, nothing like this has ever happened in my life, in all my years of the thousands of kids. My answer was, that's easy, coach. I'm the public relations director of the New York Yankees. And I went on to explain to him what the PR director, Bob Fischel, does. He does the media guide. He does the press notes for the media. He answers the fan mail. And finally, he looked at me and he said, I'll make you a deal. If you could get your grades up and keep them up, do you think you could do for my football team what this guy, Bob Fischel, does for the Yankees? And I'm like, when do I start? So I walked into that office that September day in 1968. I think I was still 13 years old, or I was 13 and or 14 that year my sophomore year, and I walked into that office as a disengaged student, and I walked out of it with a job. I mean, I'm the public relations director of the Yorktown High School football team. And I did everything that I think Bob Fischel would have done. We had a media guide. I still, to this day, don't know of any high school football teams that have a media guide, but I used to think to myself, when the guy, Jerry Desmond, comes and does the game of the week, and we're on that on the radio, how does he know how to pronounce the names? So we had a pronunciation guy. What is he going to say about our quarterback, Tim Klemchuk? Well, his parents' name is this. He lives here. His aspiration is this. Blah 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 blah. His favorite movie, whatever it might be. So, Mike Eruzione, from the 1980 Olympic hockey team, said once. He said it a million times, but I saw it in a documentary where he got the game-winning goal against the Soviet Union, and he basically said 6 inches to the right, and I'm painting bridges. And I can tell you right now, if my name Cerrone started with an S, I'm painting bridges because I don't know what I would have done without Mr. Dowds and what he did for me. Because, I mean, I won't spend any time on this, but I met a sports writer who took a liking to me, And then he moves to DeKalb, Illinois to become the sports editor of the DeKalb Daily Chronicle. Okay, nice to see it. Nice to know you. Thanks for everything. And one day when I'm a senior, he calls me up and he says, "Are you looking at colleges?" I said, "Yeah, but they're not looking at me." So I'm about, I'm going to community college or something. And he says, "Well, you need to come out here because there's a university here, Northern Illinois University, and this is perfect for you. They're now a Division I sports program. The basketball team had just beaten number 5 ranked Indiana in Bobby Knight's first year. Jim Bradley, our greatest ever player, has got a full page color photo in the cornfields in DeKalb in Sports Illustrated. So I go out there to visit it, and it had everything I wanted. I became sports editor of the student newspaper in the summers. My senior year, 50 years ago, this last season, I did an interview at halftime on our game against Ball State on October the 25th. And I said, let me look up, because I did the Ball State game back in, that was 50 years ago. Let me see what the day was. Same date. Same date. I'm in the same booth 50 years later. And that kind of set me up for everything. And then I met a man named Mike Arenstein, who was making baseball cards in his basement, ended up competing with Topps, got sued by Topps, settled the lawsuit, but he won the battle, but he lost the war because Topps said that he's got to, and he's arguing the Topps exclusivity that, well, you're selling your cards with gum. This is information protected, if it's a picture and a picture. So Topps settled and said, well, you've got to put them in some kind of publication. So he created a magazine called Collectors Quarterly where the cards were promoted in the centerfold. And when I got back from college, come back to New York, the Yankee PR job is not available. They have like 14 people on the whole staff. And I got that letter from Bob Fischel. I still have it framed downstairs in my man cave telling me that a major league front office is very small, but I'll keep your letter on file, but I'm not optimistic. So I'm writing for a weekly supplement in a local newspaper when Mike Arenstein calls me because he wants to end Collectors Quarterly. He he everybody that subscribed got the 4 issues quarterly. He wanted the last issue of 1976 to be his last issue, and his editor had left him holding the bag. And this was a time when you didn't do it on a computer like we do today. You had manuscript and you had to get hard photos and paste everything. And his editor went off to college and he needed someone to finish the job. I'm done. It did. So his editor, by the way, was someone named Keith Olbermann. So that's how long ago it was. Keith was going off to college and I was coming out of college. And I did this one thing and he gave me $150, which I thought was $1 million. And I went to him and I said, I think you should keep this going. I said, there's no other other than annuals, there's no baseball magazine other than that little crappy Baseball Digest on newsprint that basically lifts articles that have already appeared in newspapers. I said we would be the game's only full-size magazine, and you could still put the cards in the center. So he let me do that, and after a year, we did well. We somehow got on the newsstand, and we were learning as we go. I mean, somebody said this should be on the newsstand. Well, yeah, do you know how to do that? So we found out we got a distributor, and then after 2 or 3 issues, they want us to up the print run from 10,000 to 100,000. And Mike said, I'm out. That's it. We're done. And I said, let me do it. So I basically bought it from him for like $10. And I'm now the youngest editor and publisher of a national magazine in the country. And I just kept learning. I kept, we need free publicity. How do we get free publicity? Give awards. All right, well, let's give an AL and NL Player of the Year. Well, how do we make it different than the MVPs? I know we'll have the managers vote. So, if not for Bud Dowds and that meeting in his office, I'm painting bridges. But I'll sum this up by saying people ask me all the time. I'll speak at colleges. I've taught at Duquesne. I've taught as an adjunct professor at Iona in New York. And students will ask, do you consider your career successful? And I'm like, I have to because I checked every box. I checked every box, starting with PR director of the Yankees. I checked boxes I didn't even have. There were no boxes for, was blessed to, through happenstance, become the technical advisor on the movie The Natural. I didn't have a box for that. I didn't have a box for meeting two of the Beatles or Bruce Springsteen or Tony Bennett, becoming friends with Billy Crystal and Bob Costas. I didn't have box. I met my wife go at the coffee machine at the commissioner's office, where she had worked probably for 5 years before I got there. And I remember the first words I said to her were, "Do you know where the cream is?" So, and she said something like, "It's right in front of you." No, that beautiful young woman, then 25, gave up her dream. That her dream was to work in baseball. Her dream was to be a statistician. And she gave up her dream. She worked in the broadcasting department. And when we had to move to Pittsburgh to take the Pirates job, she basically gave up her dream to so I can live mine. So yeah, I would say it's been successful, and I can also say, boy, it's been a heck of a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like it. It's been kind of incredible how the journey that you've taken, and you basically just brought us kind of to the beginning of your career. I'm guessing some people will have some questions. The part of your career that probably stands out the most is the 11 years you spent with the Yankees, your dream job. And what can you tell us about that? The highlights of that 11 years, and uh, I did hear on a previous, I listened to a podcast that you had done previously that you replaced someone that lasted like 3 years in that job, and they considered them the Lou Gehrig, and you lasted 11 years under George Steinbrenner. That has to be kind of a record, doesn't it?
Well, under George Steinbrenner, it's a record that can never be broken. People ask me all the time, what was it like to work for George Steinbrenner? And my answer is the same. Look at me. I'm only 37 years old.
Yeah.
So, uh, but I mean, it was a great experience. It's kind of like the planets aligned for me. Uh, I got the job because the previous PR director in December of 1995 on Christmas Eve got fired on Christmas Eve. And the next day in the Daily News, the back page was a Bill Gallo caricature of Mr. Steinbrenner, and the headline, I believe, was Scrooged. So I started getting some calls from some friends of mine that were writers, Bill Madden, Jack O'Connell. Hey, your job's available. I said, I'm not going near that because this kid's going to get his job back. So, there's no doubt in my mind that this will blow over. But they called me about 2 weeks later and said, look, they offered him his job back. He didn't take it. He's gone. They're looking for people. They want people with more experience. So I called. And so, so I called this gentleman who Mr. Steinbrenner had hired. He was very good at this, at giving people jobs that, may have needed him. And there was a man named Arthur Richmond who was a writer. Then he was the PR director of the Mets. Then he was the traveling secretary. And the Mets kind of retired him. And Mr. Steinbrenner brought him on as a senior advisor. And I was told the way in is Arthur Richmond. Do you know Arthur? I'm like, sure, I know Arthur. So, well, call Arthur. So I called Arthur Richmond and Ricky, how you doing, my baby? How are you? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, Mr. Steiner, look, I'm the only man for this job. I gave him the whole story. I've wanted this job since I was in high school. I'm the right, on and on. And finally, I was done, and he looked and he said to me, and I'll clean it up. I'll leave out the key word. He said, there was silence for a second, and then he said, Rick, are you out of your mind? I said, what do you mean? He goes, you can't work for this man. He's crazy. He's blah, 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 blah. And I said, Arthur, you do it. You've been there for 6. Yeah, that's different. I go right back at him. I don't take any crap. I said, well, Arthur, you'll be my mentor. All right, well, let me call you back. So he calls me back an hour later and he says, can you be up here on Friday for an interview? So I drove to New York, stayed at my parents'. I interviewed with a man named David Sussman, never talked to Steinbrenner, right? And so uh, I get home to my parents' house after the interview, which I thought went well, but it was like the fifth time I interviewed for the Yankees. I'd long given up on that dream. Heck, I was the vice president of public relations for the Pirates. And then they ran out of money, and coincidentally, the Yankee job opened. So I got home to my parents' house an hour later, and my mother said, "When do you think you'll hear?" And I don't even think I got the words out. I don't know. The phone rang. And I answered the phone, and it was David Sussman. And he said, "Do you think you can get a tuxedo by Sunday night because we want to introduce you as our new PR director at the baseball writers' dinner?" So I got the job. I went back to Pittsburgh where we were living, and a week later I started. But the funny thing is, let's say I started on January 29th. Well, we go to spring training on like February 14th. And a good thing about it was I wasn't the only new person there. Everybody was new. The coaching staff, every coach, the manager, the GM, and we're going to Tampa to a brand new, beautiful spring training facility when they were in Fort Lauderdale. And the PR office in Fort Lauderdale was a trailer parked in the parking lot. Now I got a nice office, and everybody was new. Everybody was learning. So go to spring training, and I never heard from Steinbrenner, Mr. Steinbrenner, in the 2 weeks I was on the job. Never. I'm like, this isn't so hard. We had Fan Fest. Okay, we get the media guide ready. I go to spring training, and we'd have workouts, and I'd see him, and I didn't think to go up to him and introduce myself because a couple times, and he's out there, and so one day after like 3 or 4 days of spring training, and I'm thinking this is a piece of cake. There was a lobby with two elevators, but when you came out from the tunnel where the clubhouses were, you couldn't see the elevator. You could only hear the ding. So I heard the ding, and I yelled, as everybody did, "Hold that!" Like just hold the elevator for me. I get on the elevator, and there holding the button is George Steinbrenner. And he is not happy. And I can only think of one thing to say. I said, "Three, please." And he bangs the three because his office was on four. And I get in, and it's just me and him, and and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Steinbrenner, I should probably introduce myself." I said, "I'm Rick Cerrone." And I had met him years ago when I had Baseball Magazine. "I'm Rick Cerrone. I'm your new media relations director." Well, he lit up. "Oh my God, Rick, great to see you again. How are you?" Hey, and then he says, "Len Berman says great things about you." Now, Len Berman was a famous New York sportscaster. Like, I don't know what Len said, but thank you, Len. And I get off at three. He goes, "Okay, go get him. Hey, great to have you. If you need anything, you let me know." I'm like, piece of cake. The, the next day, maybe 2 days later, I'm sitting in my office in the press box, and the phone rings, and it's Mr. Steinbrenner's secretary. And she says, "Mr. Steinbrenner wants to see you in Max's office immediately." Okay, that's great, but who the hell is Max? I didn't realize I don't know any. So I found out where Max's office was. Max Margoles was the guy that ran food service. And he was the guy that would stand at the door with the list every day where you'd go have lunch. They'd serve lunch in this new media dining room after practice and then before games, whatever. So I go into Max's office, and Max is facing me, and Steinbrenner is facing him on the side of the desk with a piece of paper. And Max goes, like, "You're not going to like this, kid." What did I do? So I said, "Yes, sir." That's always how I addressed him. "Yes, sir." So he turns to me with the paper and says, "Would you mind explaining this to me?" And I take the paper and I look at it, and it's the sign-in sheet in the cafeteria from lunch. And I said, this is the sign-in sheet from the dining room. He goes, yeah, I know what it is. You mind explaining to me why we're feeding the press and for nothing? And I took a deep breath and I said, sir, my only answer I can give you is that I wasn't here when this beautiful building was designed. And I wasn't part of the group that decided to put in a dining room. And I certainly wasn't part of the group that decided to feed the press and for nothing. Outside of that, I don't know what the hell to tell you. And he goes, get out of here. And I went back up to the office and I'm like, what was that about? And the phone rings and it says Max Margolis. And I pick up, he goes, yes. He goes, great job. Don't take any shit from him. And he hung up. And for years and years and years, I never knew what that was about. He had to know I had nothing to do with it, but I've come to realize what it was. It was a test. How would he react to this situation? And I think I passed the test with flying colors because I had a great relationship with him. He never fired me. I resigned 3 times in a span of 5 weeks. And they were, if I told you the things I said to him, there's no way you're getting your job back. There's no way. You can't speak to him like that. But I don't know. He like Hal Steinbrenner said, I don't know what the two of you guys got going, but I've never seen anything like it. But you know, I'll go back to when I had Baseball Magazine in 1977. The Yankees had just won the World Series, and I landed an interview for our Q&A in Baseball Magazine and with Mr. Steinbrenner. And I went down to his office, and I desperately wanted. I'd rather be the PR director of the Yankees than anything else I could be doing at that time, but being the editor and publisher of a baseball magazine would just have to do for the time being. And but at that point, I had not given up on getting the job someday. And I remember asking him a question. I think I did a really good job in the interview. If you read it today, there's some stuff in there that I kind of like really put him on the spot. But I asked him a question about his management style, about do you treat people differently, whatever it was. But his response was, and it's not in the, I don't know why I left this out of the printed version, but it's on tape. I still have the tape. I asked him this question about his management style, and he goes, let me tell you something. There's two types of leaders. Some leaders are Pattons, and some are Eisenhowers. And you get the distinction there. I mean, Eisenhower was a cool administrator, and Patton was kind of a blowhard. And he said, I'm a Patton. And when I walked to my car, I could still picture the scene of that dusky November evening. Walking to my car, I said, that's the ticket. That's the key. If you ever get this job, just remember he's General Patton and you're a corporal. And every time I addressed him, it was when I answered the phone, I would say, yes, sir. And everything I said, sir, sir, if I can offer this, or sir, and then it became, sir, I can't let you do that. Sir, are you out of your mind? But I always started with sir. So, yeah, those 11 years, indescribable. The things that happened from winning 4 World Series to, 9/11, which we were right smack in the middle of. And, it was an incredible, but I'll tell you, I never had more fun than the 6 years I was in Pittsburgh with the Pirates. And I don't think that can ever be duplicated. Um, it was a great group of young guys. We were all friends. Um, they would come over for dinner. We'd go to movies. I went to Hawaii with the Drabeks. That's not going to happen today. And I had the Lelands came over for dinner last year, and that never happened again. You can never do that. You can't duplicate that. And everybody I talked to that was on that team, whether it's Doug Drabek or Brian Fisher or Bob Kipper, Jim Gott, all those guys, they always say, I never had an experience like I did with the Pirates.
Nice.
It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. And when we started, it was like a year in, but we were persona non grata in Pittsburgh with the drug trials, and Leland said, he couldn't give away tickets on a street corner to Pirate games, but you know, the, after my first year there, not, I mean, maybe I had a small part in it, but because of the team's performance, Pittsburgh Magazine named us Pittsburghers of the Year, and we set attendance records, and we went to the LCS three times, lost all three, one more painful than the other. It just got
Yeah.
worse till my good friend Sid Bream, who I could beat in a foot race, slides across home plate in Atlanta. And the funny thing is, I could make it a great story and make it sound like it happened before Game 7, but it was before Game 6. We thought this was neat. The clubby in Atlanta at the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, he had a DVD videotape player, and he had like a little small library of tapes, and you'd pop the tape on, and the players would have a movie on, whatever. And the movie that they the movie that they picked before Game 6 was Major League. And Major League ends with the guy sliding across home plate, the umpire goes, safe, safe. And Mike LaValliere stands there and says to me, you really think we should be watching this? And that's how the game ended. Sid Bream, not Willie Mays Hayes, sliding across home plate and the umpire yelling safe. And and I got I had in my hands in the clubhouse, all draped with the plastic, and I'm holding the MVP award for the LCS that's going to Tim Wakefield. And the minute Sid Bream slid across home plate, somebody from Major League Baseball grabbed that trophy and went, didn't ask for it, just grabbed it and ran out of the room. And all the plastic came down. And by the time the players walked in the room, there was no evidence. There was no champagne. Everything was gone. It was real. And I get, I'd seen that happen in New York at Shea Stadium when the Mets won Game 6. And they had the stage in the Red Sox clubhouse, the trophy, the owner, the champagne, and they got that out of there. But I didn't have any stake in that,
Right.
so it wasn't a heartbreak to me. Um, but it did mean I would miss the Giants Monday Night Football game when the Sunday game got rained out. Anyway, but I mean, I've had nothing but it's hard though. Believe me, I'm talking about the fun stuff, but there's it's a hard life. I mean, when you think about players today, you get back from Detroit at 5 in the morning, flight delays, whatever, and you're playing that night.
Yeah.
And every day I got to do the game notes and I got to do, so it was challenging, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
All right. Well, I think Stu has had a hand up, and then so Stu,
Yep.
go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Rick.
Let's do.
I had my hand up, and you kind of answered it too. In 1989, I met David Zen. We were both
Yeah.
interviewing for the SABR executive director position. Only time I've ever met him.
Yeah.
He had stories. He said, anything you've heard about the boss, multiply it by 10.
Yeah.
And I know that he became the traveling secretary, and
Yep.
I'm in Minnesota, and doing official scoring. I was always looking for him. So I don't know what he's doing, or if you're still in touch with him. But just a couple other questions. How far away was Yorktown? And did you go to other games, I suppose, or even the Polo Grounds? I suppose you would have been too young for Ebbets Field.
No. Well, yes, Evansfield, no, but the Polo Grounds, I went to one game in 1963, July the 9th or 10th, July 10th, 1963. My great uncle had connections to get tickets, and we sat in the first row behind home plate,
Wow.
which was the worst seat in the house because you couldn't see the center fielder. The field was humped, and it was very tough to get your bearings. But I remember to my right was the camera, and to my left was a beagle because the Mets mascot or one of the sponsors' mascots was a beagle, a gas company. I forget which one. And this beagle sat there for the whole game and never moved. Mets got shut out 1-0 by Johnny Padres. He beat Carlton Willie. And yeah, I didn't remember. I remember details, and I remember going to my dear friend, the late Bob Rosen, at the Elias Sports Bureau, and I said, "This is what I know about the first game I went to. It was Mets Dodgers at the Polo Grounds. Well, that narrows it down, right?" I said the Mets lost, and Johnny Roseboro hit the home run that gave him the margin, and Bob Rosen goes July 10th, 1963. I was there. Remember the great catch that Willie Davis made off of Frank Thomas in center field? I said, no, I told you everything I remembered about it. But see, that's the thing about baseball and people like you that are in SABR. These things are important. You know, these things are remembered. People that are not players sometimes become as beloved and as big a celebrities as the players. I mean, in New York, Bob Shepard, a public address announcer, was revered, right? I mean, radio guys, there's people around the game that are, are not on the field, but they resonate with fans and they become beloved. One quick thing that my first memory of baseball, that what got you interested in baseball? My father wasn't watching games on TV. He would take me to a one Met game and one Yankee game a year. I'd go with the Cub Scouts or the Little League. We'd sit way up. And the first game I ever went to at Yankee Stadium, which was like a cathedral next to the Polo Grounds. I mean, the Polo Grounds was kind of a dump. It was like dark and and everything smelled of cigars back then. With Yankee Stadium back then, even in the 60s, it was palatial. In my mind, the beautiful grass, it was colorful. And I'm sitting in the upper deck and I hear the voice of God, although he wasn't called that at the time, Bob Shepard. Here are all the lineups for Kansas City, leading off Wayne Causey. And I'm like, wow, they have who announces lineups? I never heard that. They don't do that. And I thought so Bob Shepard's voice is what got me. I said, this must be a big deal if they're announcing the lineups. And one of the great things is that, check the box. Bob Shepard one day in 2000 or so got laryngitis. And in the fourth inning, the scoreboard operator, Mike Bonner, calls over to the press box and says, "Hey, Shep's got laryngitis. Be ready to go in for him." On what am I, the backup quarter? I'm gonna do the PA for a major league game and and then he says, "And do it as Shepard." So I went in and Shep was still there. He's sitting behind me. And I did the rest of that game, and they said, "You better be ready to do tomorrow's game because he ain't going to be any better tomorrow." And the next day, he wasn't any better. And it was the game of the week on Fox because Joe Buck was doing the game, and they showed me doing the PA. And he goes, "If you're listening to that voice in the background, it's not Bob Shepard, it's Rick Cerrone." And I mean, I had to do a moment of silence for Gene Woodling that Shepard wrote and I read. At this time, would you please rise? It was so, and I did it one more time when he couldn't do it and his backup was not available. So, I mean, come on. How many people can say that they did PA for a Major League Baseball game at Yankee Stadium? Um, and there's another guy I got to be dear friends with, Bob Shepard. So,
Okay, I think Pedro's got his hand up.
Pedro,
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Cerrone. Can you hear me all right?
I got you.
All right. So I'm gonna try to make this as short as possible. I don't want to take much of your time. I'm a reporter. I'm 27 years old. I'm based in the Mexico-Texas borderland. I
Hmm.
cover general news, but I've also done plenty of baseball. And over the past year or so, I've become pretty worn out of it. I feel burnt out about it. And I've been thinking about transitioning to PRs, specifically sports PR, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like many people in my field, you sort of have this calling that, well, you were born to do this, to be part of the media and be a reporter. So at the same time, as much as I want to go, I also feel like I would be betraying myself. So I suppose that what I'm asking here is, I guess, some sort of advice for people trying to transition from reporting to PR.
Well, the way I would look at this, Pedro, is I think the thing you need to do is to take inventory of yourself and decide what's going to make you want to get up and go to work in the morning or the whenever it might be. Um, Look, I mean, I've worn a lot of hats. I mean, I ended up starting out in the media, so to speak. Um, and then I went and, you know, I left, I ended up in PR with Major League Baseball. Then I transitioned to this talk show that WNEW radio, a 50,000 watt station, was going to start in New York every day. And this is back in the 80s before there was all sports, 24-hour a day sports. This was part of their, lineup. You'd have this DJ, this DJ, this, and then here's Rick Cerrone and Richard Neer with the Sports Connection. But I decided doing that when we went to spring training that year, which really wasn't done back then, a radio show going to spring training and doing broadcasts. I'm standing on the field one day and I'm watching the PR guy and I'm like, I want to be part of a team. I want to enjoy what I missed when the Mets won in '86 or the Twins won in '87 or, the Phillies, the Orioles. And, I'm not part of I wanted to get that ring or, whatever. So I think that you got to do what you think is going to make you happy. And it might not, you might go over to sports PR and decide, um, this isn't for me because you're on a different side, But if you go into sports PR, the one thing I will try to leave you with here is in my day, so to speak, and look, I get it. I'm 71 years old. I'm still very active, but the younger generation is really kind of, changing things. But the younger generation in PR, somebody said to me recently, in our day, we were in the yes business. That's not the case anymore. Now, when I went to work for the Pirates, at some point during my tenure there, I wanted, I felt like this was a blessing that we had these jobs. And I wanted everybody on my staff to adhere to certain, quote, principles of our success. The number one principle I remember was treat everyone like a VIP. Don't change the way you treat someone if you learn that he's somebody like, yeah, what do you need? Well, my brother Derek Jeter. Oh, you're Derek's brother. Hey, how you doing? You can't do that. Treat everyone like a VIP. But one of them was you better have a damn good reason for saying no. Now, you can't say yes to everything. I wasn't going to let Penthouse magazine, fly with the Yankees and do a behind, nothing good can come from that, I thought. So, but you better have a damn good reason, but for saying no. Now it's kind of like, you better give me a damn good reason to say yes, because it's really hard. And I won't bore you by citing examples. I'm a magazine editor. I need the PR people for things. Oh my God, get guy on the phone for 10 minutes. Nope, sorry. Um, so try to be a yes person. Try to be positive, and you can't get caught up in. I've seen a lot of PR guys that they kind of want to kowtow to the players and the manager because they want to share or whatever. If you're going to, you've got a lot of constituencies when you're in PR. You've got the players, the coaches, the manager, the owner, the GM, the media. It's like the United Nations. You're trying to navigate. You have a number of constituencies, and it's very challenging. Um, but I think only you, Pedro, can make that decision of, and you don't have to make it tomorrow. You're a young man. Um, but you also need the opportunities. So, I mean, I was blessed, and, I give my son a lot of credit. My son grew up in a major league clubhouse, so to speak. And when he started, he had no interest in baseball or sports whatsoever. When he was 5, 6 years old, I couldn't get him to keep score. He'd rather draw Godzilla on a piece of paper or something. And then the light switch went off in 2003 when he was 10. And he decided that that's what he wanted to get into sports business. Thank God it was sports business and not PR because there's no money in PR, so to speak. You can't quantify your value to the team in PR. You just can't. The guy that sells the signage at Yankee Stadium makes $1 million because I get this. You can quantify it. I sold $17 million worth of signage, or I got my media notes out on time, and there were no mistakes. Whatever. But he decided he was going to go to college, and he went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, got his degree, and then he went looking for jobs. And not one time did he ever say, "Do you know anybody at the Yankees still? Do you know anybody do you know anybody at the White Sox? Do you know anybody?" He did. I never made a phone call for him. And he started out with an independent team, went to the El Paso to work in ticket sales for the El Paso Chihuahuas, the Padres AAA team, and then he decided he was going to go to work for the Florida Panthers 5 years ago. And he now has, I have 4 World Series ring, and he's 2 rings behind me now, and he did it all on his own. And he found a way. I never connected him with anybody to interview for a job. And now, with these online services, whatever you want to call them, jobs in sports, there they are. I mean, when he got the Panthers job, he was interviewing with 4 NHL teams: the Devils, the Red Wings, the Arizona team, and I think he picked the right one, by the way, just based on his apartment. But yeah, he did. You got to be a go-getter. It's not going to come to you. Um, I once talked to a class at St. John's University and told them my story, basically what I just told you, and I took questions, and a young man in the back of the room raised his hand. I said yes, and he said, "Mr. Cerrone, your story really resonated with me. I mean, I feel the same way. My dream is to be the assistant general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers, and I wonder if you could give me any advice." And I said, "Well, let me ask you this question." I said, "What are you doing here at St. John's to make that happen?" "Well, I'm taking this class." "Well, no, no, class, that's like breathing." I said, "What are you doing? Like, what's your involvement with the basketball team? What's your involvement with the?" And he says, "Well, really nothing yet." I said, "Well, then my advice to you would be get off your ass. Because I don't think someone's walking in this room and saying, 'Excuse me, sorry, but I'm looking for an assistant GM. Is anybody interested here?' I mean, these are jobs that hundreds of, people are, might be applying to. So it's completely, you control your own destiny, but you're not going to do it. Like I say, you're not going to, I told my son, what with the best advice, you know, PlayStation's not going on your resume. Knowing another language will, knowing this, knowing that, computer, PlayStation, I don't think so. Unless you're going to go to work for PlayStation, but
There you go. Okay, I think we have Craig had his hand up.
Rick, I just wanted to ask you if you have any stories about being confused for the other Rick Cerrone,
oh,
and then are you going to write a book?
well, I've got half a book written. I can't get a lot of interest in it, though. The people that I've shown it to saying this is brilliant, you got to get this published. But we have too many Yankee books. We got this and that. My book wouldn't be a Yankee book. It would be a motivational book that somebody that was flunking out of high school ends up with 4 World Championship rings or whatever. But you ask about the other Rick Cerrone, the catcher, and I'm hoping that no one here thought, well, I thought I was getting the catcher,
Yeah.
the Italian stallion. But anyway, that that confusion has dogged me from the day he signed a professional contract in 1976 till this Saturday when I was at the writers' dinner and 2 young men came up to me and said, "Excuse me, but I can't help but notice your ring." I said, "Yeah, it's a 2000 Yankees World Series. Here, put it on, take a picture." "Oh, they're taking pictures. Oh, thank you so much." "Oh, Cerrone. Oh, great, thank you." And the guy says, "First of all, I got to thank you. Every time I mail you a request for an autograph, you always send it back." I'm like, "No, it's not me." But we both get confused for each other. When I had the radio show, people thought he had a radio show. He said people would ask him, "How do you do both jobs? How do you go from you're on the air and now you're?" So when I was with the Yankees, my first 2 years, he was one of our broadcasters, but the TV broadcasters didn't travel with the team. So we would get to the hotel and we'd get each other, like, we'd get the same room. They'd see the same name, although his has one R, and they'd give him the key. And then when I get there, there's no key, or vice versa. One time I checked into a room at 2 o'clock in the morning in Milwaukee, and there's someone sleeping in bed. And the next day at the batting cage, Rick Cerrone comes over to me and says, "You walk into a room last night at about 2 o'clock and say, 'Oh shit.'" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That was my room." I'm like, so we've been confused for each other for, yeah, I mean, perfect story. Pictures behind me. We win the World Series in 1999, and we go to the 2000, and we go to the White House, and we're going to meet the president, and who was very gracious to us. And they line you up, and you have a card that you give to an adjunct. I'm not saying that right, but and he reads your name as you approach the president. He asks you, "How do you pronounce this?" Cerrone. Okay. He says, "Rick Cerrone." And George Bush looks at me and goes, "Seton Hall," which is where the other word. I said, "No, sir, I'm not that." He couldn't. What do you mean you're not that, Rick Cerrone? It's the Yankees. So I said, "I'm the PR guy." And he used to own the Rangers, and John Blake was his PR director. I said, "I'm the John Blake of the Yankees." He goes, "Oh, don't say that." So, but I mean, it dogged me till Saturday night.
Yeah, funny. Hey, Francis, you've had your hand up.
Yes, I have well, one question I have, and it's probably been written somewhere, but how did George Steinbrenner treat his sons in the business setting? Was he as tough and unpredictable with them as he was with other people?
Probably not as unpredictable, but I've got, and that's a great question that I don't think I've ever been asked. I think, look, let me take you back to Mr. Steinbrenner's upbringing. He had a very demanding father. He went into the family business, and he once said that, if I ran 5 races in college or high school or whatever it might be, and I won 4 of them, the only one that my father would focus on was the one I lost. So that's who he was. You're a product in many ways of your environment, of your parents, of your upbringing. But Hal and the late Hank are very different than, they're they're almost suffering from PTSD, like post Steinbrenner stress disorder. But uh, they're very different. They're much more low key. I think Hank, who passed away sadly, was more like his father, a little more unpredictable. Hal is very meticulous and very, but that's a great question. But listen, I love George Steinbrenner. Um,
Mhm.
I, he was a very generous man. He would do things that and would not want anybody to know that he did it. Um, I mean, there were times when he'd call me up to his office and said, "Yeah, there's 2 people going to join you on the flight to Chicago today. I met this father and his son. They're going to go get a father and a young kid traveling with the Yankees on the plane because Mr. Steinbrenner, thought." And one of the
Mhm.
great things is, and I think it was David Cohn that did it. You used to get meal money. I don't know how they do it now, but when the trip started, David Zen that you mentioned would come up with a box with everybody's envelope with their meal money, and it was like $70 a day. So if you're going away for 10 days, there's $700 in in that envelope, and that was your money. And uh, you know, and that was for whatever you needed the money for. To take a cab to the ballpark, to get your clothes cleaned, your breakfast, your whatever. And David Cohn went up the aisle and said, "Everybody, open your envelope, $20, $20." Took $20 and gave the kid like $400. He's on the team. He's got to have meal money. So there were great people. David, I mean, I could go down the list of our players, and here's the other thing is when you get into baseball or any sport, I think not everybody's going to like you. And you're going to find out that there's some, these people are from all walks of life, and everybody had a different upbringing. They have different habits. They have different, you know, not everybody is, I don't want to say a name, but Gary Cooper in Pride of the Yankees. But And there's some people that I'm like, oh God, I can't believe we're getting this guy. Why did we re-sign Darryl Strawberry? Why do we? Darryl Strawberry was the nicest man you ever meet. Dwight Gooden, dear friend to this day. Um, I did not want Roger Clemens. And when I found out we're getting Roger Clemens, we did get rid of David Wells. So there was a because David was a great guy, but he was kind of a handful. But Roger Clemens was like the greatest teammate you could ever have. Like my first experience with Clemens was we're in spring training and I'm inundated with requests for Clemens. Now, some of them I can dismiss. He's not doing that. He's not doing a local radio show in Seattle. He's not doing, but an interview with Bob Costas for baseball's All Century Team, the cover of USA Today's Baseball, Weekly. Oh, there was like a dozen things that I can't make the decision. So one morning I went up to him and I said, "Look, I didn't know him. It's probably the first conversation I had with him. I mean, Mr. Clemens, um, I have dozens of requests for your time, but I've narrowed it down. I can't make the decision on these." I think he goes, "Well, do me a favor. Write them down on a piece of paper, what they are, and give it to me after practice. I'll take it home, and tomorrow we'll get together and we'll go through, which ones I'll do, which ones I won't." Took the paper, put it in his pocket. He left. The next morning, I walk in the clubhouse, and Clemens waves me over. He doesn't say a word. He just hands me the piece of paper. Like I think he's giving me this back, like, and I open the paper, and it's like under every one, it said tomorrow, 8 a.m. After Friday, but he had every one, and he did every single one of them. Um,
Mhm.
he was a tremendous teammate, as was Strawberry, as was Gooden. Um, you know, the, but not everybody is the same. And you got to be prepared that there's going to be guys that, for whatever the reason, I mean, I can rattle off names that these guys just didn't like me. They didn't like my
Mhm.
sense of humor, or they didn't like, whatever, or maybe there's some, uh, thing I thought was funny that they didn't, whatever, but just do the best job you can, and you got to treat everybody the same. Um,
Maybe they didn't like the other Rick Cerrone.
yeah, it's funny when someone says, someone once said about somebody, um, I never even met the guy. They said, he doesn't like you. Like, really? I've never met, no, he does not like you. And I always thought this. And then one day I got to know the guy and this and that. He says, well, you're like that other Rick Cerrone. I don't get along with him. And I'm like, oh, that's what.
All right, Chris, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, Rick, if one of the signature features of Baseball Digest is the game I'll never forget.
Yes.
If we if Rick Cerrone was featured and we read that article,
Yep.
what would it be?
Well, by the way, we've run out of people, so that's going to be the next issue. No, I'm kidding. Um, so, what would the game I'll never forget be? Well, the game I'll never forget goes back to when I was a fan on June 24th, 1970, when my buddies and I took the bus from Yorktown to Yankee Stadium for a doubleheader, a weekday doubleheader against the Cleveland Indians. And you could not script I wrote about this about 10 years ago for Yankees Magazine. Um, Bobby Mercer had four consecutive home runs. Someone threw a M80 or whatever that landed under Cleveland catcher Ray Fosse's butt and blew him like lunged up. It was a bench clearing brawl. Steve Hamilton retired Tony Horton on the Folly floater. He popped out to Munson, and there's video of that on YouTube. And then he crawled into the dugout. That was the wildest day in the history of Yankee Stadium. But um, if we look at my career, let's take the Pirates and the Yankees. Um, the Pirates one would be a rainy Sunday in 1990, maybe. Um, Rainy Sunday. Oh, it was cold. It was like 11,000 people there, and we're playing the Cubs, and they're winning in the eighth inning. They're winning like 7-2, and we tied it up in the bottom of the ninth to send it to extra innings. They get 5 runs in like the 12th, and they're up 12-7, and we got 6 runs in the bottom of the inning, and won the game. And somebody sent a letter to Baseball Digest and asked that he was at. He said I was at this game where I seem to remember the Pirates overcame a 5-run lead in the ninth. Well, it wasn't 5 runs in the ninth. It was it was the eighth and the ninth, and then they got 6 runs. Has it ever happened? How many other, has it ever happened since? Has any team ever come up with five runs in the seventh inning or later twice? And my good friend John LaBombarda at Elias reported back to me that that has never happened in the history of baseball. That a team overcame 2 5-run deficits after the seventh inning. So that's my Pirates one. Now, Yankees one, I guess it's got to be the Aaron Boone game. I mean, you're down. Well, I don't remember what it was, 5-1, 5-2, and look at my son's in the stands trying to tell him, I want to go home. I want to go home. My wife says we're parked in the players' lot. We can't get out till the game's over. So, and then to tie that game up and to have Aaron Boone win it was one of the great. And I saw 2 perfect games. Uh, One in which Don Larson threw out the first pitch. Um, Dwight Gooden's no hitter that he reminded me Saturday. He goes, that was 30 years ago. And I said, well, you've aged better than I have. But and that night, Harold Reynolds was in the stands with a T-shirt, like just a uncollared T-shirt, watching the game as a fan. And he had a tryout or trying to get in with ESPN, and he called them up. Uh, Probably from a payphone, and said, "Listen, can I file something after the game?" And they said, "If you can file something, if you can get good, and we'll put it on the air." And Harold Reynolds comes up to the press box and says, "I don't have a jacket." So he's doing the thing with my suit jacket on, which he reminds me of every time. He thanks me every time I see him. You saved me, man. You were there at the start. You gave me my wardrobe. So, but it's funny, the Gooden thing. We brought Mr. Steinbrenner signed Dwight Gooden going into spring training in '96. So I kind of inherited, he was on the roster, and I'm like, do we really want to go through this with Dwight Gooden? He's been through rehab. Dwight Gooden, I mean, a month later, I'm having lunch with him in Seattle. Nicest guy in the world, but he was terrible the whole month of April, much of May. They took him out of the rotation, and then they put him back in. And we're in Minnesota, and he got bombed. And one of the writers comes over to me, goes, "When are you guys going to end this charade and release this guy?" And 2 weeks later, he throws a no-hitter. So I like to say, I told the writer, I see something coming. I think he's got a no-hitter in him, but I didn't say that. So I guess that's my three. That great wildest day in the history of Yankee Stadium, and Bob Costas, the guy that Bob Costas went to the game with. They were in high school, right? And they were sitting in right field. They caught his fourth home run.
Wow.
And I said, "What happened to the ball?" He goes, "We went home and used it." So,
All right, that's cool.
Thank you.
All right, Andy, you're up.
All right. All right. Thank you. Rick, you kind of touched on this a bit during your presentation, but I was just curious, during your time with Pittsburgh, what was it like working or interacting with Jim Leland when he was the manager?
it's almost indescribable. I had 2 managers, right? So Leland's up for the Hall of Fame, like last year, whatever. And I called his wife Katie, who worked in the front office when I was there. Um, and I said, she goes, "Oh my God, Jim is so nervous. And what he's nervous about is that people are so excited that he thinks he's going to disappoint them." I said, "Katie, he's getting in. Trust me, he's getting in the Hall of Fame." And she said, "What, do you have inside information?" I said, "No, no, no." I said, "Katie, I've had 2 managers. All the managers I've worked for have gone to the Hall of Fame." So she laughed. It was Joe Torre. But Leland was like, I'd like to say he was like a mailman, but he was a mailman. He was a mailman
Hmm.
in Ohio when he was a blue collar guy.
Hmm.
No pretense about him. Um, and oh my gosh, I I'll tell you, there's a lot of them, but sometimes you're like, how did I get in? How did I get in the middle of this? So a couple of years ago, an umpire died. Oh no, no. A friend of mine says they were talking about that argument that Lasorda had with Frank Pulley, right?
Hmm.
In the
Okay.
78 World Series that he was Mike, he missed, he's got to get out of the way. He's got to get away.
Yes.
Don't show me up there. Don't spit at me, Tommy. Someone said, is he still alive? And I said, I don't think so. But so I went home and I Googled Frank Pulley. This is maybe 5, 7 years ago. And his New York Times obit popped up, right?
Okay.
So the headline of Frank Pulley's obit is first umpire to use replay. I'm like, whoa, whoa, this doesn't sound right. And it says that in 1997 or 99 at Marlins Park, the old
Yes. Hmm.
football stadium,
Hmm.
he went over to the third base camera to see if a ball left the ballpark or hit the wall, whatever the story was. I'm like, that was not the first time replay was used because I was there when it happened and it was my fault.
Oh.
So I get the job in Pittsburgh, right?
Hmm.
And I watched the rest of the games in 1987 September, and I have a meeting with the guy that runs our scoreboard, Mike Gordon, and he said something along the lines of there are places in the ballpark that from certain seats you can't see it. Like if you're sitting here, you can't see the right field corner. So he says, what I want to do is we want to show a replay of every run that scores. That's our thing. If it's a run scoring, we're going to show a replay. So we go to the general manager, Sid Thrift, and we say, this is what we want to do. And he goes, well, you can't show a controversial play. I'm like, if there's no, 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 we're not going to show you. As long as it's not controversial, you show whatever you want. So then we go to Leland. And Leland said, well, it's not controversial. No, you can't show it. Close play, play. So we have our orders from Sid Thrift and Jim Leland that we're okay to show the replay of any run scoring play. So we're playing the Mets. Monday Night Baseball, Al Michaels, right? Tim McCarver. Are we in Pittsburgh? 54,000 people. Dwight Gooden on the mound. And we have the bases loaded, right? I think we're winning 2-1, or we have the bases loaded, and Gooden uncorks a wild pitch. The batter jumps back out of the way, and the ball goes to the backstop. Picks it up. The run scores. Jose Lean scores from third, and we took the lead or whatever. And all of a sudden, and we show the replay. Nothing. So I forget the guy's name. He came from an umpiring family, like his son, Paul Runge. He goes over to the home plate umpire, Paul Runge, Davy Johnson, from the third base dugout, walks out, and they're talking, and he's pointing to the diamond vision in center field. Isn't that blah blah blah? And he calls the umpires together, and Leland is sitting back on the bench like this, never moves, just sitting there watching the whole thing. All of a sudden, Runge goes over to him, and Leland goes nuts, and he's screaming and yelling. Runge had ruled that I saw on the replay that the ball hit the knob of his bat. It's a dead ball. The runner's got to go back to third. I'm not making this up.
Oh dear.
So Leland protests the game, and you know we end up winning the game. So the protest is no. Oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to walk into because first thing I do after the game is go in his office and he tells me when to let the media in or whatever. I'm like, I'm not looking forward to this. So I'll clean this up. I'll take out the key word. He's sitting behind his desk, smoking a cigarette, and I walk in. He doesn't say a word. Like 5 seconds go by, I'm standing there, and he looks at me and goes, well, so much for that idea. So I'm just, you believe that? You believe that shit? Blah, 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 blah. How come? And then, if you go back and you look at the clippings from that day, and I've gotten them because I wrote my column about it. the next day he goes, "This is baseball, apple pie. You don't need, we don't have, there's no, and then, so the next day, Bart Giamatti, the National League president
Mhm.
at the time, issues a statement in full support of the umpire's decision. And the umpire said, I know what was in my heart. I had, I'm like, what the hell? The next day, Peter Uberoff, the commissioner, says, oh, no, 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 no. There is no place for baseball. We don't have replay. I'm ordering every team and every umpiring crew, you are not to use replay. So it became like a big story, thanks to me.
Nice.
Thank,
Okay.
But Leland
thank
was
you.
Leland was great. Just a regular guy you want to have a beer with, or whatever. And I look forward to seeing him in spring training and having dinner with him and his beautiful wife. And he's fabulous.
Thank you.
Well,
As was Joe Torre, by the way.
we've gone well over an hour, but I know, Rick, you said you wouldn't mind if we
Where
went
am I
a
going to
little
go?
longer.
I'm snowed in Pittsburgh. Where am I going to go?
There you go. I don't know if anyone else has a question. I don't see any hands up. I do have a question. Rather than talk about your past and your experiences, I want to use your experiences to, you've worked with the Pirates, you've worked with the Yankees too. Are you, and I just read an article today about the disparity between the small markets and the big markets. What, and I know the collective bargaining agreement ends at the end of this year. If you can look at your crystal ball with your background, what do you think baseball needs to do? Or do you think there's a competitive balance problem? And if so, what should baseball do about it?
Well, I do think there is a competitive balance, and I can't believe it's 3 years now that we had the last potential lockout, whatever. And I remember writing it, don't screw this up. I remember using a quote from Bill Parcells, the great football coach and tremendous baseball fan. He once said, uh, at some point, stupid always shows up. And I said, baseball can't afford to have Bill Parcells be right. And they didn't. They settled it and they got it 3 years, new collective bargaining. Um, at which point they put in the swing off. I'm watching the All-Star game from a restaurant in Vegas because my wife and I went to Vegas for a couple days, and I'm not hearing the sound or anything. I had never heard of a potential swing off. So when this game got tied, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do after 9 innings? And now the umpires are conferring, and they got Boone out there and Dave Roberts, and what are they doing? They're having this swing off. Well, look, I'm a purist, but I'd rather have a swing off to end an All-Star game as epically as they did last season than the commissioner going, we're out of pitchers.
Right.
So something good came out of the collective bargaining. But I think this year is going to be uh, immensely challenging to not have a work stoppage because it's at both ends. There's teams that are spending an ungodly amount of money, like the Dodgers, the Mets. The Yankees aren't even in the conversation anymore, so to speak. They've become like the voices of reason, so to speak. But then you've also got the Athletics, the Pirates, the Rays. I mean, I'm in Pittsburgh. I'm a Pirates fan. That's the team I root for. And it's like you don't deserve to have a major league team. You're not operating like you're a major league team. You're operating like, hey, we got a major league team. Can come and see the fireworks. We got a great mascot. We got a great ballpark. Um, but I think they're kind of waking up to that they've got to be more competitive. But, they're not signing, the Schwarbers or the Bellingers or they have to shop in the bargain department. Um, I, I we say there needs to be a salary cap, but there sort of is because you're paying, 100% on the dollar over a certain amount. Well, now that we find out there's teams like the Dodgers and that can do that. Um, but I think there has to be a floor. I mean, you can't have a team with an $80 million payroll, or there's got to be a minimum, and that minimum's got to be 125, 150. And if you can't afford that, then you shouldn't have a major league team. I think I'm not as optimistic that there won't be a work stoppage. like when I was at uh, the baseball writers dinner and I had a role in it. I did the program and I handled the photos for Getty Images, the red carpet photos, whatever if you want to call it that. A number of people from the New York chapter were like, "Well, we'll see you in 2 years if we're lucky, because there certainly won't be a dinner next year in the labor negotiations." Um, it's but the other thing is, look at all the money the Yankees have spent. And how many World Championships do they have in the last 25 years? One. Um, there's teams that, that somehow manage to even make it to the World Series. Milwaukee hasn't, but, uh, not a, so I think it makes for great stories when the underdog or the David, beat the Goliath, but it's probably getting to the point now where something has to be done. And I don't think anything good ever comes out of a work stoppage, because I don't think the owners can win. I don't, because when the pressure gets put on and government gets involved and this gets involved, and no one's siding with ownership. Um, so that's a that's the ugly side of the game.
Yeah.
We might. I don't know what Baseball Digest is going to. We listen. Baseball Digest is published every whatever month, and now it's 6 times a year. Never stop publishing through a pandemic, through you know work stoppages. But I'm not sure. I don't know that we might have to curtail the print image, the print go digital just until the work stoppage ends. But so every subscriber will still get the magazine. But I'm just we haven't talked about it, but. Um, you know, Tough to to do a 672-page magazine 6 times a year during a work stoppage.
Right.
What are you going to write about? So
Right.
one thing I learned is nobody wants to read about a work stoppage. So
Yeah. Okay. Pedro has his hand up.
yep.
Yep. Sorry, I got another question, Mr.
You-
Cerrone. Uh, it struck me that you said you were a purist, so I gotta ask if you could revert back in any of the rules brought by the commissioner, by Rob Manfred, what would it be? And how do you think what I mean, you said about the salary floor, but do you see a willingness from players and owners and the commissioner to actually work it out in case of a stoppage?
I think the players' union will be. Listen, the players follow their leadership. There'll be a time when players are like, look, they've got a fund, so the players won't. They're not going to go without any money. Um, I think it's going to be very hard for ownership to win a work stoppage. And I'm not sure there should be a winner. It's got to be give and take. Why does somebody? Uh, but did you talk about rule changes that I like or don't like, or
Yes, it struck me that you said that you were a purist when it comes
a
to
purist? Yeah,
baseball.
yeah.
Yeah,
I am a purist. I think I'm 71 years old. I'm not 25, and but I will tell you that I think the pitch clock saved baseball, because baseball was in a bad place 5 years ago when games were averaging over 3 hours a game, and it's just the pitch clock has been so effective that I didn't even I asked questions during the World Series. Are they using the pitch clock in the World Series? Because I'm not seeing it, and no one's talking about it. It's just become a part of the game. Um, if I could change any rules, it would be you could throw 4 pitches now to intentionally walk a guy, because things could happen.
right.
I know it doesn't happen often. And the other thing is, I love the I don't even know what we call it now, but you can't put these ridiculous shifts on, which I think is good. The only one I question still is I understand why they put in the ghost runner in the 10th inning during the pandemic, and then they kept it, and they kind of like it. Baseball teams like it, and I get this. because you don't want to have to send three pitchers down because you're out, you went 18 innings. 18 inning games might be good for fans, but and we can see the games still go that long. They didn't use the ghost runner in the World Series, obviously, but I would do it in the 11th inning at the earliest. I'd play the 10th inning uh, with the traditional rules. Now we've got a new rule coming in, and I write about this in my column in the upcoming March-April MLB preview issue, where I think baseball's done a good enough job with these rule changes that I'm all for this ABS automatic ball strikes challenge. And the thing I like most about it is you better choose wisely, my friend, because you only get two.
Right.
And you don't get courtesy ones like you do with the replay. So if you want to be the guy answering questions, why'd you challenge a strike call in the third inning with nobody on base and you didn't have any left in the ninth inning with the game on the line? And it's so quick, and the fans can watch it in real time. They can see um, and I think that's terrific. And I'll give props to Rob Manfred, the pitch clock, and they work on these things. I mean, they're not just throwing these things. These things have been used in the minor leagues, and I think they got these right, and I think they deserve the benefit of the doubt moving forward. But the only thing I would do is, and again, I'm a purist, but I'm like, I can live with the runner at second because look at it this way. Yankees are down 5-1 going into the bottom ninth. They score 4 runs. Yankee Stadium's in a frenzy. And now it's the top of the 10th and we're starting it over again. The Blue Jays are up. No, you got a guy at second, you got action. You both have, and there's strategy involved. If I'm the visiting team, do I move the runner over? No, I need more than one run. So I'm okay with it. And I think baseball has to evolve because people's tastes change. What people want to see is changing. I mean, people aren't going to see double features anymore. People are barely going to movie theaters anymore. Um, and I think baseball, it's still the same game. Um, if you went to a game in 1962 and went to a game in 2025, you'd get it. I mean, somebody was complaining about you know, the the swing off. Oh, what's going on? Come on, now we're having a home run. I said, would you rather have a flag football game? I mean, look at the other All-Star games. They're so desperate. We're playing countries against countries. We're playing. The NBA basically chooses up sides. I'm going to root for a team that LeBron James picked. Like that's my team. It used to be East versus West or AL. Baseball still has the only All-Star game that matters that people care about. The Pro Bowl games now are on a Tuesday night.
Hmm.
The Academy Awards are moving down the road to YouTube. So we should be thankful for the things we do have about baseball that work. And I'll leave it at that.
Does anyone have any other questions? You've been more than generous with your time.
We're in the top. We're in the top of the 10th. We got a runner at second, so take your best shot if you got it.
Well, Francis, you have your hand up.
Yes, I've got I realize time may be a factor. Just a quick assessment by you of your opinion on the explosion, I guess we could say, of baseball analytics. Uh,
Oh,
how do you feel about that? Do you feel the statistics are overcoming the basics of the game, or is it a good thing?
well, I think it's a good thing to a degree. You can't dismiss it. If there's a team out there that doesn't believe in it, they're not going to do well. But what I miss about baseball, what I think we've lost is the human element of it. I mean, we don't want to make baseball where it's like an actuarial table, where it's like, we're counting cards, like they said in Moneyball, which was not a realistic portrayal of the A's in any way. I found it funny that movie talks about it like they won the 20 games in a row and they had this great success. because they were, quote, counting cards. They never mention in the entire movie that they have the American League MVP, the Cy Young Award winner, right? They don't mention these people. It's like, we fixed Scott Hatterberg, because of analytics. Um, I think one of the things baseball has lost, so to speak, is the personality of the game, the personalities. I mean, scouting has been almost decimated. Um, they used to have every ballpark had a press room, and everyone's was unique. And when we had the press room at Yankee Stadium, I remember I redecorated it with all these pictures. It looked like you were walking into the bar, the Cheers bar from the old TV show, with pictures, and they were all non-game action photos. Like there's Yogi Berra and Phil Rizzuto smoking cigars, because their kids had babies, or there's just different things. It was great. It was homey. People, there was a bar. Scouts were there. Now, if you go to the press room at Yankee Stadium and at Citi Field, Yankee Stadium's like a subway station. It's very cold, very, there's no personality. And Citi Field is like a Radisson hotel. You could be in a Radisson hotel in Minnesota. There's no character. Um, that's what I miss most about I mean, the guy that was the bartender in Three River Stadium that dated back to Forbes Field in the press room, Diz Bellows, who was a legendary. The guy, John Lizzo and Nick in Yankee Stadium, these were beloved people, and they're gone. They're gone. It's a different person every year. They're both cafeterias now, where you get your tray, and baseball's lost a little bit of that. I don't know, relationships, and I mean, I'll tell you, the first time I ever, you're gonna think I'm making this up, but when I started Baseball Magazine, our first issue was like spring 1977, and 1977 was the 50th anniversary of the 1927 Yankees. Now that's as legendary a team as you will find. So we put them on the cover, and I wrote to all the living members. There's 7 of them, and they all wrote back like, "What do you?" I don't remember what I asked, but they gave me a little thing that we had in the magazine. I had a story on the team, and when I went to opening day of 1977, they were honoring the living members of the 1927 team. So I think 5 of the 7 came back. Mark Koenig, the shortstop, and Bob Musial didn't come from the West Coast, but Joe Dugan was there, Wade Hoyt, Bob Shalke, Mike Gazzella, George Pipgrass. So I had the magazine with me, and I walked by the press room after the game had started. I think I stayed down there for the ceremonies. And I looked in the press room, and there were the 5 guys sitting at a table. And I walked in and I gave them each a copy of the magazine. They said, "Sit down, sit down, sit down with us." And my first game, I'm sitting at a table with Joe Dugan, Jumping Joe Dugan, and George Pipgrass and Wade Hoy, and they're telling stories. Remember that time Babe showed up in Chicago with, I'm like, holy cow. So I have no kick coming. I have no complaints. I look back, I'm still active, so I don't feel like I'll say I'm in the 7th inning maybe, or the 8th inning, whatever it might be. Um, I got a lot of great memories and made a lot of good friends, and still, the funny thing I didn't say is that if Mr. Dowds had said, "Okay, the likelihood that you're going to get this Yankee job is not great. So what's the second thing? If you don't get the Yankee job, give me something else that you'd like to do." I would think about it for a second, and I know I would say, "Okay, I'm the editor of Baseball Digest."
Uh,
So I got to do both.
There you go. All right. Well, you've been more than generous with your time, and I think we could probably all sit here and listen to more of your stories, but
Read the book.
there you go. So, okay. Well, I think we'll sign off. And Rick, I want to really thank you for agreeing to do this and sharing your stories. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll enjoy reading the Baseball Digest.
Well, please do. And also, I know that John is going to send you SABR members a link
Right.
that you can go on and get a discounted subscription, digital and print. And if you, with that subscription, you also get access digitally to every issue in the history of Baseball Digest.
Right.
So you can go back and read what they were talking about in 1945, and some of it, I mean, you'll find it fascinating of things that have happened that back then seemed like insane, there were crazy ideas, or, but it's just, they're great reads. So hope you'll take advantage of the subscription offer. Just hit the link and you'll be able to subscribe.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
thanks for all you do. Seriously, thanks for all you do. You're a tremendous asset to the game. It's one of the great things about baseball that they have something like, SABR, where people like you that love the game and want to contribute great historical and uh, you know, it's just it's really a great organization, and it's an honor for me to be with you guys tonight.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor to have you. And yeah, members, I'll be sending that out tomorrow in an email, the link for the Baseball Digest. I'll do that tomorrow. So, all right. Well, I think I'll sign off here. And thanks again, Rick. Thank you, everybody, for joining our meeting.
Well, thanks, and make sure you all get home safely.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.